Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to the third OECD Competition Open Day. Today, the OECD Competition Division opens the doors to welcome not only delegates to our OECD Competition Committee, but all of our partners and stakeholders who share an interest in competition law and policy. We started organizing this annual OECD Competition Open Day in 2019. Our objective with this annual event is to share the work of the OECD Competition Division and the debates of the Competition Committee with the wider competition community. We strongly believe in being open source. Year after year, the OECD Competition Committee and the OECD Competition Division strive to deliver high-quality policy analysis and evidence, which we look forward to sharing with you all. The COVID-19 crisis has been our priority over the last several months and will be a recurrent theme across our discussions today. The crisis and the impact it has had on our economies has only underscored the importance not only of competition policy, but also of international cooperation and collaboration in this area. The OECD, as part of its overall COVID-19 policy response, has striven to address the competition challenges posed by the crisis and to provide the basis for a constructive global discussion on the appropriate policy responses to these challenges. We have developed a series of policy notes and background papers and organized roundtable discussions with heads of agencies, which I invite you to visit on our website. Competition policy and enforcement has an important role to play for economic recovery. Three key messages came out of our analysis on competition and economic recovery, which I hope we will dig into more deeply during our open day discussions. We must ensure governments respect the principle of competitive neutrality when it comes to deployment of state support. Competition authorities must be part of a whole of government response to the COVID-19 crisis and can help promote structural and regulatory pro-competitive reforms. And governments must also empower and resource competition authorities so that they maintain effective levels of enforcement. Despite the crisis, we have also carried on with our regular business of promoting fair and transparent competitive markets through the work of our Competition Committee and the OECD Competition Division. This work aims at promoting the sharing of experiences and identification of best practices, improving competition frameworks and strengthening institutions that apply competition law, supporting capacity building in competition policy and enforcement throughout the world, and supporting the building of more pro-competitive regulatory reforms. We achieve these aims through best practices roundtables, reports, country reviews, as well as country projects based on our recommendations, standards, and methodologies. Last year, this work included the publication of 15 background papers discussing topics such as conglomerate effects of mergers, competition in digital advertising markets, and the topics that you see in the agenda today. Much of this work was discussed within the OECD Competition Committee, made up of 37 OECD member countries and 17 non-OECD economies. We also work with partners beyond the committee to promote good competition policy globally. For instance, we worked with the International Competition Network to issue a report on the current state of international enforcement cooperation between competition authorities. We also brought together authorities from around the world through our Global Forum on Competition and our regional fora of Asia Pacific, Latin American and the Caribbean, and MENA. Further, in 2020, we provided 13 training events via our regional centers in Korea, Hungary, and Peru. We also engage in a continuous dialogue with judges. The judiciary is crucial to shape competition policy. For example, together with the Federal Court of Australia and the ACCC, we have published so far 5 competition primers for ASEAN judges. The latest one launched just a few days ago on market definition. These primers offer short practical guidance for judges on the most complex aspects of competition cases, covering a range of issues from fundamental economic concepts to the role of economic evidence. The OECD Competition Division also works with many other competition authorities and governments to foster pro-competitive reforms in country-specific projects. This year, the Competition Division will complete a 3-year initiative supported by the UK government to undertake reviews for all 10 ASEAN countries, examining regulatory barriers and promoting competitive neutrality in the logistics sector. The project will culminate in a regional report to be launched later this year. We also worked with the Icelandic government and the Icelandic Competition Authority to identify regulatory barriers to competition and make recommendations in tourism and construction using the OECD Competition Assessment Toolkit. We are also supporting Brazil, Peru, and Ukraine in fighting bid rigging in public procurement, building on the OECD guidelines for fighting bid rigging in public procurement. We have also completed the peer review of Ecuador's competition regime. In recent years, we have also helped to shape the debate on how competition policy can improve gender equality around the world. We received more than 60 applications to our call for research proposals. We selected 7 of those projects, which we think have the potential to offer practical insights on how to apply a gender lens to competition policy. We will be hearing from each of them during our workshop tomorrow, which I do recommend you register for. Today, we are launching the 2nd annual OECD Competition Trends, which is available on the OECD website. Data is at the heart of what we do here at the OECD to support the design and development of evidence-based policy advice. This unique annual publication serves exactly this purpose. The Competition Trends contains data on agencies' resources and enforcement activity from 56 participating OECD and non-OECD jurisdictions. This year's 2nd edition consists of 2 parts. One that provides an update on the competition enforcement trends in the participating jurisdictions that together cover approximately 50% of the world's population and 2/3 of the world's GDP. The 2nd part deep dives on merger control by describing different choices made by jurisdictions when designing their legal regimes, analyzing global merger control activity, and identifying trends in merger control enforcement. In our publication, we show that the resources of the participating competition authorities in 2019 increased in most regions, both in terms of budgets as well as in terms of staff. This is a comforting signal as this shows that competition enforcement is continuing to gain importance in governments' economic agendas. Fines related to competition infringements decreased slightly in 2019, although this was more a result of fewer and lower abuse of dominance fines. The cartel fines actually increased. And let me now tell you about today's agenda. We have selected the highlights of the Competition Committee 2020 agenda. We will cover which will be covered in 4 main sessions. Sustainability and competition is the first session. Then competition economics of digital ecosystems. Then competition policy in the economic recovery. And finally, competitive effects of killer acquisitions. Our first panel on environmental sustainability and competition will discuss how to protect competition whilst encouraging environmental standards and green innovation. This is a complex question that requires us to consider price effects and weigh them against quality and innovation effects. We face the same question when we analyze anti-competitive behavior in digital companies and digital ecosystems in particular, which we will discuss in our second session. We look in particular at how competition between ecosystems works, what are the differences with other types of markets, and how this may impact the enforcement of competition law. The third session will focus on competition policy in the economic recovery, and for which we will have the honor and pleasure to be joined by our keynote speaker, Mariana Mazzucato of the University College London, whose keynote will be followed by our panel of heads of competition authorities. Our last session today will focus on the competitive effects of killer acquisitions. As you can see, we have plenty of interesting topics to tackle in this open day, and we have an excellent, absolutely extraordinary lineup of speakers whom I want to thank warmly for being with us today. A warm thanks also to the superb OECD competition team for organizing this event. And finally, to all the participants, thank you for being part of our open community. And I strongly encourage you to share your comments or ask questions and make this an interactive and engaging event via our platform. I wish you all an excellent competition open day.